This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and a part of a series of interviews with the different political parties standing here in Guildford, in the Guildford area, in the forthcoming West Surrey Council election. I'm today with Graham Drage of the Reform UK Party. Graham, I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly there.
Yeah, you have indeed, Martin. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Dragon, and thank you for giving your time for this interview. Now, you're the chair of Reform UK Guildford, but you're not standing as a candidate yourself.
Correct statement. Yes.
S-
I am the chair, but I have decided not to stand in the local elections.
But you're representing your parties in this interview.
Yes, for Reform UK Guildford.
So,
Correct.
how long have you been with Reform UK, and why did you join that party?
I've been with Reform UK since I think 2020, end of 2023, 2024. I joined Reform UK because, to all intents and purposes, I'm a working class conservative. Instinctively, I did a politics degree 35 years ago. Um, Born, bred, educated in Guildford. So obviously came back here to raise a family, to build a business, to do all of that sort of good stuff. But then I realized I was pretty much politically homeless, as the phrase goes, in terms of being a business owner and a centre-right conservative. So I decided that Reform were the party that best represented my values and my needs.
Okay, so what are you expecting for the result in West Surrey?
Um, I'm looking forward to some really positive results this time round, Martin, particularly in those parts of Guildford that have been neglected for a very long time. I think it's worth bearing in mind the the current environment in which this local election will take place. We've got unprecedented levels of debt. We're also coming together into the new West Surrey Unitary Authority and incurring or inheriting debt from a number of other districts and boroughs, which gives us this huge figure of
Yeah, we'll
four,
be
four and a half.
talking about that later, but I
Okay.
just want to really concentrate on how many seats do you think you're going to be able to win?
We're going to win at least 6 seats, but I would be unsurprised if we won several more than that, Martin.
Okay, and that's out of 90.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking about in Guildford.
Oh, in Guildford. Okay.
Well, yeah, because I understand, my constituency pretty well. Across the board, I genuinely don't know. Obviously,
Okay.
Reform are surging in the polls. They're doing very well across the country as a whole. Um, you know, West Surrey, slightly more difficult to determine because, there are still slightly more sort of liberal instincts in this
So
part of the
that's
country.
6 out of 10, is it, in Guildford?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, well, we'll see. Now, your party is quite controversial in some people's eyes, and many believe your party to be beyond the pale sometimes and racist. They say that directly to me sometimes.
Right.
Recently, Caroline Panetta, who's standing in the outer London borough of Bexley, claimed Islam was the religion of rape, incest, and paedophilia. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't, Martin, and I'm sure you know that I wouldn't. My position has always been that having done a politics degree, that tax-paying citizenship accords people certain rights. And if those same rights, can be availed from other people who are not tax-paying citizens, then citizenship is damaged, and by extension, democracy is damaged too. I think the first responsibility of a state is to look after tax-paying citizens and its public services. That's the only context in which I really consider either the advantages or the disadvantages of immigration. But no, I wouldn't agree with that statement.
Okay, so what would you say to Caroline Panetta, who's not only a member of your party, but a candidate?
I mean, I don't honestly know, Martin. You're putting me slightly on the back foot here. I was really expecting to address more local issues, if I'm to be
We will get
honest.
on to that, but it's just that a lot of people, people do say this about your party. So I wanted to get a feel of what you think about it. And you've said that you don't agree with it, but
I
but
I
but
don't
you
agree with
but
it, but you,
but
you know,
how do you as a party, how are you going to deal with these views that do exist within your party?
Well, we will constantly work to, moderate views which we regard as being on the extreme edge of the party, but also embracing those views where people have genuine and legitimate concerns about migration. It's not racist to believe that a government should look after its tax-paying citizens
No, and I purposely
of all.
haven't
No,
asked.
let me finish this point, Martin. They should look after tax-paying citizens of all races, creeds, and colours before they look after non-tax-paying citizens. It's a legitimate concern. It's not racist. It's not xenophobic. It's none of those things. Personally, I'm very outward looking. I speak several languages. And my view is very different, that we actually should be very open and
Okay, but
welcoming.
I was careful not to frame that question within the context of immigration, but because it's an accusation about a religion. And so, what vetting have you done of the candidates here in Guildford?
So the Reform HQ vetting process takes place at several levels. First of all, it takes place at Reform HQ level, whereby they interrogate candidates. They go through all of their social media, their professional backgrounds to make sure that there's nothing in their backgrounds that would be regarded as undesirable. We then go through a second stage whereby we pick up the phone to people who've gone through the first sift. So that will be myself and other members of the Reform Guildford Executive, just to get a sense as to who these people are, whether or not their values are called with our own, and if we think that they're the right sort of people to represent Reform UK. And then at that point, we'll then go to the executive and we'll agree whether or not they're going to be offered positions.
Okay, so you interview them, do you?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and do you ask questions about their views on racism, etc., in that interview?
We do ask questions about immigration. We don't caveat it in those terms. I think racism for me is something that will definitely be picked up. It will surface when you begin to talk about a country, in the context or immigration in the context of a country, its obligations and rights to its citizens. So those questions do get leveled, but not in the same way that
But
you
don't
would probably put them.
Okay, so if I was doing an interview, any kind of sort of vetting type interview, I would say to someone, have you got anything on your track record that could be used against you? Have you said things of that nature?
Don't forget, those are already the questions which Reform HQ
Okay,
will have put to them as part of the
okay,
national process.
all right. So it is covered.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It's covered.
okay.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Now, quite rightly, you want to talk about local issues, and so do I. So let's turn to the commitments made by your Guildford Town candidates. Firstly, on social housing, it says you're going to increase the number of homes available for local residents. How do you intend to do that?
Well, there's a number of things that we can think about here. So I think we do need to consider the fact that Guildford's a growing borough. I think it's something in the region of around 140,000 people at the moment, maybe a little bit more. Um, Guildford currently has around 2,200 households on the social housing waiting list.
Hmm.
Only 360 homes are made available every year. Now, I want to set a little bit of context before I tell you what we're going to do, Martin, because the Lib Dems last election promised to build 3,500 social housing homes. Only 450 affordable homes have been built since 2019. So, and of those, approximately 250 are
Okay, let me
social
just pick you up there. It was
housing.
the 2019 election, they made the commitment. I remember it being for 3,000. It's a bit of a detail, but it wasn't in
Okay.
the last election.
I have 3,500 was the target.
Okay.
But since 2019, 450 affordable homes built, of which 250 social housing. Now we know from our experience canvassing over the last 6 weeks that there are a huge number of properties that are just standing, social houses which are standing empty, derelict,
How many?
semi-derelict,
How many?
not being renovated. These are houses which should be available to
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
and
but
they
how
are
many are
not.
there?
I think in Westborough it's over 60 properties across the constituency. I
Okay,
think it's around 250, something
all
like
right.
that.
Well,
It's a substantial
I've
amount.
I've had slightly lower figures, but it's a detail really. But the thing is, there even if we put all those, even if all those houses became inhabitable tomorrow, it's not going to fix the problem, is it?
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. We've got to take, the starting point it is really about being honest about the scale of demand. Because if population grows faster than the housing supply, there's pressure in rents, housing prices, waiting lists. So the real question is, how do we align housing, infrastructure, and migration policy so that communities like Guildford can actually cope? For me, this is about, there's a number of things we need to do here. We need to make sure that we link growth to infrastructure. So we need
Yeah,
to make
but
sure,
we're veering off from social housing. I want to know how you're going to increase the number of council houses,
well, we would have to renovate the existing stock, and we would
right?
have to build new houses.
Okay, so if we renovate the existing stock, you say that'll give us another 200 or so. That's not going to meet the need, is it?
It's no, it won't, but it will
Right. So
certainly.
how are we going to build the others?
Well, we're going to have to find areas where we can actually build, and I
Right.
think,
And then we're going to have to buy the land, or the council will have to buy the land.
yes, potentially we will have to buy the
Okay.
land.
And where they're going to get the money from?
Well, there are multiple savings that can be made across the council. Do you want to get
Okay.
into that?
Okay. No, well, we will get into that, but I just want to work out how you're going to be able to build more social housing because it's
Well,
something very few councils are able to do these days because there's so many government restrictions that affect the building of new housing. And not least of the problems is the availability of funding to do that.
of course
But
it is, but there's some basic things that we need to think about. So, you did cut me off slightly there, Martin, but I think it's worth keeping in mind that there has to be an infrastructure first pledge. We can't just build, housing estates without considering whether there's GP surgeries, school places, whether there's proper drainage systems in place. These things need to be, considered very, very thoughtfully, before we even talk about where we're going to just, build new housing estates.
okay, I'm sorry
I
if I
think,
cut you off, but we've got limited time and I want to get through the
but
questions.
but these are
Uh,
very important things, Martin.
Yeah,
It's
I
not simply
agree.
the case of just
Infrastructure
bricks
is
and mortar
extremely
here.
important, but it also costs money. So that's what I'm trying to tease out here all the time, how these things are going to be done. Now, on parking, you say you're going to put residents first. What does that mean?
What it means is, Guildford Borough Council are responsible for off-street enforcement and things like that, public car parks. Now, at the moment, we know they're spending huge sums of money, just in terms of being able to contract out and manage the car parks. So just talking about car parks alone at the moment, the contracted out figure, the income for car parks, I think in the last financial year was about 4.9 million, whilst the enforcement costs for those car parks were 4.4 million. So at the moment, it's being managed very, very badly, and we need to make sure that the council is not just sucking money out of motorists, and actually generating very little benefit to the community. So I think other than just sustaining hidden employment. So we need to make sure that we do more to manage our car parks effectively and make sure that the money that's coming from those car parks is reinvested, maintaining and managing the parking service, highways and transport related projects, environment projects into the borough. All these things are incredibly important. So that's what we're talking about, making sure that we're delivering back into the community when we take these funds out, and not
O-
just,
Okay,
not
so
just
so when
sorry,
you
go on.
say put residents first, you actually mean manage the car parks more efficiently.
That's one aspect of it, absolutely, yes.
Well, is there another aspect?
Well, we and I think you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. There are some simple things that we can do. We have devoted a lot of time, to those more neglected areas of Guildford, so Guildford West and Guildford North, over recent weeks and months. And the parking issues in these parts of Guildford, not the leafy, wealthy parts, but perhaps the more economically challenged parts,
Yeah.
are absolutely dire. The roads are much more narrow. Parking on pavements is commonplace. People cannot walk up pavements. If they've got prams, they have to go into the road. So we need to come up with proper parking measures that takes account of all of the pressures that come from the business park, and everything else. And we need to address this soon, because it's
Okay.
becoming very,
Okay.
very challenging for those
You
areas.
mentioned proper enforcement in your leaflet too. So what do you envisage?
Well, as I say, it's about making sure that parking reflects the needs. So that might involve putting in proper parking controls, such that cars cannot gratuitously park all over the pavements and block them for pedestrians. There are other things that we can consider, but until we actually have some representation on the council, we're not going to be able to know what falls within, the limits of what we can and can't do.
Okay, uh, but
I
but
think
but
I
more
think we also
enforcement is likely to cost more money, isn't it?
Well, it will cost more money, but again, if there are results from that, then number one, that helps the constituents, and number two, we'll use any monies which are raised from that by ploughing them back into measures which alleviate the problem. I
Okay,
think it's also, Martin, I think it's also worth touching on very briefly the fact that CCTV at the moment is a significant, has a significant presence in Guildford. Monitoring penalties in 24-25 rose by 87% in Guildford. Now, this is just another attack on motorists. And the problem is that at the moment, the council are not thinking carefully about the way that they structure things. There are a lot of restricted lanes which are pushing motorists into much narrower places. We know that a lot of bus lanes at the moment have been closed off and not being used. They're pushing traffic into the wrong place, and there are sort of unintended consequences around all of this, and we need to tackle these kind of issues rather than just trying to draw more money out of the motorists by fining them more and more and more.
okay. Now, another commitment is to keep our streets clean and crack down on fly tipping. How are you going to do that?
I think we need to make it easier for people to dispose of rubbish, and we need to make it easier for people to report rubbish. Now, I was out canvassing in Park Barn, as you know, a part of Guildford West over the weekend. I went into an underpass that ran underneath Edgerton Road, and there was something which looked a lot like a crime scene. It was a burnt out mattress and a huge pile of abandoned clothing and personal effects, also all partially burnt out. Now, according to the residents, this pile of detritus has been sitting in this underpass for months, and it's been reported to the council multiple times. The Lib Dems do nothing about these issues, particularly in West and North. So we need to make sure that we're much more responsive to the needs of residents, such that number one, the council is brought in to dispose of these things when they're seen. This is not an isolated incident. We can point out dozens of locations over Guildford West and North where this happens. And
Okay,
we need to make sure that also residents, when they also find that they have problems disposing of rubbish, that they're supported to do that in an efficient and an affordable way, in a way that makes it easier for them to do. You would never see these kinds of issues in Guildford Southeast or Guildford Southwest, where there's affluence and where there's money. The Lib Dems wouldn't want that to be seen, but they'll happily neglect those parts of Guildford where people don't make so much of a fuss.
okay. Now, you're going to scrap net zero commitments, but over 99% of climate studies agree that human activity, primarily burning fossil fuels, is driving rapid global warming. And global surface temperatures have risen by 1.1 degrees centigrade since the late 19th century. That's a NASA figure. I don't think they're particularly
Sure, sure.
politically motivated. Isn't scrapping the net zero target simply irresponsible? Aren't you just putting your head in the ever warmer sand?
Well, first thing to say, man, we take, Reform UK takes environmental stewardship enormously seriously. But we believe it has to be rooted in practicality, in the priorities of towns like Guildford, and it has to represent value for money for residents. So what does that mean? That means focusing on what actually works at local level, rather than just chasing expensive top-down targets that make very little measurable difference globally and actually just impose costs on households. So we're not neglecting of our commitments in relation to the climate, but we think there's a number of things that we need to do here. So, we need to prioritize obviously environmental improvement where it's tangible and practical. So we need better air quality. We need to protect green spaces. We need responsible planning that protects the character of that area. We also need, secondly, to sort of support innovation over imposition. So cleaner technologies, energy efficiency where it's economically viable, rather than forcing costly changes onto residents. And lastly, we need a degree of honesty here and proportionality. The UK contributes a very small fraction of global emissions, less than 1%. So a local policy has to be balanced against economic reality and fairness to taxpayers. So I think yes, we care about the environment, but I would say we reject symbolic gestures that just drive up bills without really delivering meaningful impact to Guildford residents.
But it might be that our individual efforts are not enough to affect the change that we require. But that doesn't excuse us from making those efforts, does it? I mean,
No,
if
it
I
actually
say,
doesn't.
well, there's litter in Guildford, if I drop my sweet wrapper, no, it doesn't make a jot of difference. That doesn't excuse me. I mean, it might not make a huge difference if I drop that sweet wrapper, but it's still wrong, isn't it?
Well, I don't think anything in what I said prior to you talking about sweet wrappers contradicted any of that, because I completely take on board all of our responsibilities in relation to climate and climate change. And that's why I set out a threefold approach. And I
So
think that's
how I don't understand how would scrapping the net zero target help?
because these are top-down measures that make very little measurable difference either locally or globally, and all they do is impose real cost. But that doesn't mean, Martin, that we shouldn't be prioritizing environmental improvements that are tangible, that are practical, and that are affordable. Now, I can go into this in any level of detail if you'd
Well, we
like
haven't
me
got
to.
time, I'm afraid, but
No, I
I
understand that, but
no.
it's important that you keep in mind that you're talking about top-down net zero targets. I'm talking about still meeting our environmental and our climate obligations, but by looking at it differently.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier on the legacy debt that the West Surrey County at the moment is going to have to take on. Four
Huge.
billion pounds, four
Yes.
thousand million pounds. It's a huge debt. How would you propose that they tackle that?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. This is and I need to again set a little bit of context here, Martin, because a 48% rise in debt at within the council, first of all, is a very important addition to all of this. Whilst the Tories were in control of Surrey County Council, so we know that borrowing in financial year 24-25 went up from around 750 million to about 1.07 billion. So, and that was under Tory control. Now, these aren't sudden shocks. We know that send demand has risen sharply, central government support has
Yeah.
tightened, but a responsible administration should have anticipated and planned for that. So that's first thing to be borne in mind. Secondly, Guildford Borough Council, the Solace report was absolutely devastating in terms of what it said had happened within Guildford Borough
But
Council.
Guildford's got about £300,000 worth of debt. That's not the big deal. The big deal
Martin,
is
we
what
had to sell
happened
it.
in
We
Woking and
No, but Guildford Borough, let me talk about this. Guildford Borough Council had to sell off £50 million of assets under the Lib Dems simply in order to avoid bankruptcy. And the Solace report was absolutely clear. It said that there was a lack
But
of
my
governance, oversight,
question,
and
no,
challenge.
no, sorry,
Important
Graham. My
thing.
question was, what are you going to do, or what are you going to propose to do? Because you might not be in charge of West Surrey Council. What are you going to propose is done about the £4 million worth of legacy debt?
Yeah, well, but I needed to set that context, Martin, because I think this
All
is
right,
the
well, you
most
have now.
important.
So just tell me what
No,
you're
but this
going
is
to
the
do
most
about
important
it.
thing. I'll tell you, reform will bring back rigor, transparency, and accountability. So before any new commitments are made, we will establish a clear and honest understanding of the council's true financial position. So, yes, you've talked about it. Woking, 2.6 billion, Spelthorne, a billion, Surrey Heath, 170,000, blah, blah, blah. These are huge figures. So the first thing that we need to do, bearing in mind we really have no representation on the council at the moment, is to get a clear and honest understanding. From that point, we will then cut waste and ensure that every pound of council tax is directed to where it belongs, to frontline services that protect, support, and strengthen our community. Now, to me, that is absolutely the first priority of any new administration, as it comes in. So strong public services, they depend on strong financial management. Everything else is just pie in the sky until we know that that's working correctly. So that means facing the pressures early, making difficult decisions in time, and ensuring that every pound is used effectively to deliver for residents, not just absorbed by sort of inefficiencies and ongoing delays. So
But but
that's my,
but always a council should be trying to be ever more efficient.
but they
But
don't,
what
they
I'm
don't, and
talking
that,
about, yeah, well, maybe
no, but
not.
they
But
don't,
I'm
Martin. And
what I'm
I've
asking
already,
you, is uh, that your measures will just help increase the efficiency of the
no, they
operation.
won't.
We're looking at a situation where the council starts off bankrupt.
Yeah, of
And
course we are. You're absolutely right,
so
Martin. And this,
I don't see that just hoping that you can be more efficient is going to solve the problem.
well, as I say, we do not have representation on the council at the moment. When we do, we will then be able to peel back layers of the onion and start to understand what's gone wrong.
Okay,
But,
but you're
if
asking
I,
people
no,
to
no,
vote for you, and
I
I
can,
don't.
Martin.
What are they
I
voting
can,
for?
Martin. I can if you'd like to give me an opportunity. But obviously, at this juncture, there is a limit to what we know. But from my perspective, we know that there are a whole raft of things where money savings can be made and that where there are avoidable inefficiencies. So, let's take diversity, inclusion, DEI programs. This is an area where huge amounts are spent, where unnecessary box ticking exercises are taking place. We know that there are new layers of governance that are being proposed. We're creating this new West Surrey Unitary Authority, which is supposed to strip away all the layers of governance. Now the Lib Dems want to bring in a new town council layer, which will add additional cost. We will do away with that. We will not allow that to happen. We will ensure there's no
So will you
ideological
do away
environment.
with the town councils in Godalming and
But
Farnham?
sorry, I can't speak to Godalming, Martin. You're talking to me here about
Well, you
Guildford.
stood there as a parliamentary candidate.
Yes, I did, but I'm Martin.
If you have will your party seek to remove the town councils from Godalming and Farnham?
I cannot speak for Godalming. I am no longer in charge of Reform UK Godalming, Marty. I'm very sorry. I can talk about Guildford, and I can tell you
Okay,
that we will do everything within our power to either stop the implementation of a town council or we will remove it retrospectively.
okay,
It's an expense we don't need. There are
okay.
other things that we can do. There's inefficient send commissioning. There's as I say, there's ideological environmental spending, which I think we can look at very, very closely. There's a whole lack of financial oversight. And that's why that Solace report is so very important to
Well,
review.
I do hear what you're saying about increased efficiency, but I can't see how that would and in any way equate to the 4 billion. I don't think people have got their heads around how
I
big a
do.
problem this is.
It's huge, Martin. It's huge. No one's underestimating
Well, I
the
think some people
scale.
are. I'm not accusing you necessarily of doing, but I think a lot of people have got their heads in the sand over it. It hasn't been debated that much.
It hasn't, and I think it's absolutely shocking in the first instance that this is even being hung round the necks of Surrey residents. We are not responsible for the fact that Woking overspent on their credit card, and we should absolutely not be on the hook for paying this off. In fact, people of my age won't even be responsible for it. It's our children and our grandchildren
Well,
who
that's a
are
good
being
point.
saddled with this shocking debt.
Yeah.
The one thing I would like to say is we have lined up some extraordinary candidates who come from some
Okay.
really
I'm
interesting financial backgrounds. We've got
right.
chartered accountants who've worked in these areas, audit and tax experts, financial directors, people who really understand finances. We are prepared, if people will lend us their vote on May the 7th, to put some of these people into the council and really understand what's gone wrong here.
Okay, we're very close to the end of our time now. I'm just going to ask you one very quick question, and that is, if there was if Reform are in charge of West Surrey Council, will they allow Ukrainian flags to be flown over council buildings at any stage?
It's not something I'd considered. We'd probably have to. I don't know. I can't see why not, Martin. I don't object to Ukrainian flags any more than I object to the
Okay,
Union flag. I don't object to it, but again, it probably wouldn't be my decision, so I can't comment on that, to be honest
okay,
with you.
because I think I'm right in saying that Reform councils have stopped them being flown in other areas. But anyway, you've answered the question. Graham Drake, Chair of the Reform UK Guildford, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Martin.